First of all, congratulations to you, man. Good
Thank
to see
you, man. Lovely to see you too.
You know, last time I spoke with you about the theory of everything, you're talking about how you had to jump in and out of Stephen's life in one day. You'd be in three different aspects. And in here, you're obviously having an incredible arc where you're going from Einar to Lily. Did you have to jump in and out of that as well, very similar to that?
Do you know, we did actually. It was, unfortunately, again, with films, it's so difficult to get to shoot them chronologically. And so we shot all of the parts of the film that happen in Copenhagen in one, over a week or two, and within when Lily comes back to Copenhagen, she's very different from when she left. So there was a sense of jumping around, and unfortunately, I mean, as an actor, you dream of being able to do it sequentially, but that, it's not the way it works. So it added an interesting challenge to making the film, to making sure that Lily's transition was smooth and. Yeah, it was interesting. And
one of the things I remember you focused on with Hawking was the eyebrows. And in this movie, I was looking more at the character and the way you kind of like smiled and looked down. And those little subtle movements. Was that one of the main focuses you wanted to focus on? Because that was like, for me, like the most expressive thing about like the performance. I love those.
Thank you, mate. No, for me, finding Lily in this film was about finding her smile, and that being something that as she's beginning to transition, it's finding comfort in herself and finding herself. And when I felt like I'd begun to discover her smile, that was a wonderful breakthrough for me. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a very incredible sequence when you're in front of a mirror, and it's very revealing, obviously, you know, for you as an actor, but also for the character as well. When you have to do a moment like that, you're on set, you're naked in front of a mirror, you have a lot of crew around. Do you have to fully immerse yourself in that character to be able to completely do that without being nervous about it?
Whenever you sort of have to, whenever you sort of expose yourself in either emotionally or physically in a film, it's very odd because there are a group of 20 people behind a camera sort of observing you. But that moment in this film felt, it was always such a beautiful moment in Lucinda Coxon's script, and for me it was an essential moment of Lily's investigation into herself and finding herself. So actually, by the time we shot it, I just Tom made sure, we talked about it a lot, and Tom made sure that it was covered in a way that was about her finding herself, but eventually her finding that smile. That's what I tried to find at the end of that take.
Now, considering the timeliness of this film coming out now, obviously, I mean, you bring up someone like Bruce Jenner and the Caitlyn Jenner. What do you think? I mean, I know this is so hypothetical, but what do you think Lily would have said to Bruce?
I would say that she was always Caitlyn, and it was about discovering herself. And in the same way that in this film, Lily was always Lily, it was about unpeeling the sort of confines of masculinity that had been placed on her by society or by the sort of the gender that she was assigned. But I feel that what I find astounding about Lily's story is the courage. And before there was any language or before there were any predecessors for her to relate to, but almost 100 years on, there has been a bit of progress, but there is still so much of a way to go. And in the way that Lily's story was, and her book Man into Woman was incredibly inspiring for many trans women, I think what Caitlyn has done by talking and highlighting and putting a spotlight on many of the issues felt by the trans community, hopefully she is, I think she's doing an extraordinary job in helping continue the conversation and educate cisgender people into understanding what it is that trans people have to go through.
You mentioned the moment in front of the mirror and how she's finding herself, and I wonder, as you leave a role like this, which is a very emotional role, what did you find out about yourself that you didn't know going into the project originally? Like, what is something you found about yourself?
Well, I suppose when I was prepping the role, I was incredibly ignorant. So the whole thing has been an education for me. I'd never really questioned the notion of masculine and feminine, and I suppose I'd seen gender as being a binary, as being two things, you're one or the other, without ever crossing my mind that the notion of gender as being a spectrum, and that's what I learned. This idea that we go, oh, something masculine. Like what is masculine? Is like being sporty masculine, and what being arty feminine. It seems so sort of antiquated that in some ways. So if one sees gender as being this spectrum, and where people sit on that there's a fluidity in that, and that for me was perhaps that we shouldn't be defined by specific terms.
I agree 100%, and I love this movie's creating a conversation. So it's always wonderful to see. Thank you for
Lovely
making important films about important people.
Oh, thank you.
I love the line in the film. There was a moment when I wasn't me, when I was just Lily, and I thought that was a very fascinating line. I was thinking about you as actors, and do you ever completely lose yourself in a role? Like, is there a moment where you forget you're you?
Well, I think both Eddie and I are on the page that we're not method actors. We're very much, I believe in, we're both, put our head into the sand, and we do the work, and you loved kind of intensity of coming on set, and then you probably also, with this very emotional ride of this film, we kind of had to, step out of it by the end of the day and in the breaks. But, the wonderful thing is when you act, if you're working with such an amazing actor as Eddie, who's so committed and so open and listens so much, like when you have takes when suddenly everything's so fluid and you kind of just go on a turn that you maybe did not expect. That's the moments when I love my work maybe sometimes the most, because you kind of, by the end of the take, you didn't really know what happened, and that's normally because normally when you have one of those it takes, everybody in the room can feel it, and I think that's when you tiny got a bit lost for a few seconds.
I think one of the most emotionally devastating moments I've ever seen in a film was the moment when you were literally telling him, can you please go get Einar? I need to hold my husband, I need to hold him. And for me, it's an incredible moment to watch from an acting standpoint, but do you remember where you were like that day in the sense of like shooting that scene and how you mentally get to that state? I mean, it's a devastating sequence for me as an audience member.
Yeah, we started the first 2 weeks of shoot. We shot all the kind of interior studio work, which is the Copenhagen and Paris flat. In the film, where a lot of the most kind of big emotional scenes between Lily and Gerda are taking place. So in one way, it's almost when I came out of those 2 weeks, I don't really know what happened. It was like, I almost just ate and slept and worked. And you because you never really have much time. But working with Tom and Eddie, who kind of set the rules of how, you always felt so safe and comfortable. So even though you are extremely nervous, knowing that, like that scene is probably one of the ones that when I read this script, popped up on page, and the one that got me. So I knew it was a big, and I was probably quite nervous, but they just kind of, took my hand and just, let's go in and try.
I want to ask you about the paintings. I'm a big fan about how movies are made, and I always want to go on set and see a film get shot. So, like, I know the paintings are done by other painters, but, like, as you sit there and work on a painting, do you ever actually manipulate them yourself, or is it all done?
Well, I'm doing I think it's 2 scenes when you see me make the drawings.
Yeah.
And I learned how to do some voluptuous curves and some legs. So I did 2 weeks of, intense kind of training just to be able to do that, because I've never really painted it before in my life, even though I love art and respect everyone who can. It was a lot of fun to try it out.
When you leave a role like this, there really is a lot of emotional elements to it. Do you miss Gerda? Do you miss going to set and being her? And it's such an important, timely film about an important message that people need to be talking about.
Oh, surely. I found Gerda was a role that I almost saw it as a privilege, because I kind of so looked up to her. Sometimes I was like, her kind of acceptance and heart that she feels for this other person, and the will of supporting somebody, until the end, was something that I really admired in her, and I wish that I could, do. And but then, it's almost like now when you kind of reunite and you have a wonderful time to meet the actors and meet Tom and the people involved in the film, then you're kind of reminded of what you did back then. But in the films, it's also, kind of do one thing and then you set it free and let it go a bit.